Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. For years, Tisha B'Av, the ninth of the Jewish month of Av, the fast day commemorating the destruction of the first and second temples that falls in the middle of the summer, was observed by only a small percentage of Jews and ignored by almost everyone else. This was the case throughout the diaspora, but also here in Israel, where even Orthodox observant Jews would go through the motions. They would fast and pray, but they didn't really give too much thought to the significance of what it all meant. This year, all our indications are that this will change. The Hamas attacks against Israel on October 7th have made Israelis feel that the events of Tisha B'Av are not just historical, they are real and present. Israel is not safe, it is not secure, and most importantly, it cannot take itself for granted. Today, we know that as a nation, we have been playing with fire, endangering the Jewish people's third commonwealth, a reference to how the modern state of Israel is the third act of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. The first ended with the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, the second with the destruction of the second temple by the Romans. And according to Jewish tradition, the primary reason for the temple's destruction was sinat chinam, hatred between Jews. It weakened the nation and it allowed external enemies to invade. This Tisha B'Av needs to be a reminder not to let that happen again. We can't go back to the way we were on October 6th when we fought among ourselves. We weakened ourselves. We divided ourselves. On today's episode, we talked to Rabbi David Stav, Chief Rabbi of the city of Shoham and Chairman of Tzohar, an organization which works to foster vibrant and inspiring Jewish identity to guarantee the Jewish future of the state of Israel. Tzohar provides an array of Jewish life cycle programs and services for hundreds of thousands of Israelis every year. And this year, to mark Tisha B'Av, they wrote a new prayer, a new kinah, called Kinat Be'eri, named after the kibbutz Be'eri along the Gaza border, which was attacked on October 7th. Here we go. Rabbi Stav, it's very good to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining. So we're talking just before Tisha B'Av, and as it's beginning essentially in Israel. And obviously the ninth of Av, which is always historically for thousands of years now been a very sad day for the Jewish people. But this year, it feels, I think, for a lot of people that it takes upon itself new meaning, new significance. How do you view, just in general, this moment in time?
Yeah. The truth is that, you said it like it's very simple, that usually we felt that Tisha B'Av is a difficult day. The truth is that most Israelis didn't feel that the ninth day of Av is a special sad day. There is a prohibition in Israel of opening the theaters and the movies and the coffee shops. But actually, most of the Israelis didn't really feel that it's a sad day. And, even about regarding the observant people, I must admit that we had to work very hard to explain that the fact that we don't have a temple is something that is so bad for us, because after 72 years of having the Jewish state, we felt more or less secured here in our country. And we felt that actually the special prayers, what we call the kinot for Tisha B'Av, had to need a kind of a commentary, because they didn't resonate to most Israelis, even the observant ones. None of us was alive when the temple was destroyed. And once we have a country and we have a state, we actually felt that nothing is bad here. I mean, there are difficulties, there are challenges, but most Israelis felt quite secured in Israel. And I must admit, including myself, in all surveys, Israelis describe themselves as people that are very happy here in Israel and believed in the future of the state of Israel. And Tisha B'Av reminded them something that belonged to the past and is not really connected to their real lives. I think that this year, we don't need any commentary to the prayers of Tisha B'Av. We all feel that our place here in Israel is not guaranteed. We have to struggle for that. It's not something that we can take for granted. That's A. And B, that I think that we all feel that the events of the October 7th, that I guess most religious people will commemorate them tomorrow night, are deeply connected to the destruction of the Second Temple.
They're deeply connected because it's just another moment of tragedy in a long line of moments of tragedy for the Jewish people, or because let's remember where we were on October 6th as a people. We were fighting. There was, whether it was over judicial reform or yes, Bibi, no Bibi, or sitting in a government with Arabs or not in a government with Arabs, or Haredim and secular. I mean, all the fights were there. We had what was, that what's known as wanton hatred, sinat chinam, right, which is according to Jewish tradition, is one of the causes of the Chorban, of the destruction of both temples.
I think both elements that you mentioned are true. I think that for many of us, it's whatever you said is true, which means that we see that when our sages used to say that wanton hatred is the main cause for the destruction of the temple, we saw it in real. It's not something that belongs to the past. What, and you just forgotten to mention maybe the clash or the dispute about the fences between men and women in Yom Kippur that caused to a big
in downtown Tel Aviv.
In downtown Tel Aviv, a big clash between observant and non-observant people. And I think it's more than symbolic that why we were fighting about the fences between men and women, our enemies broke all the fences between us and them and invaded the surrounding of Gaza, kibbutzim, and moshavim. I think that's one level. But I think there is a second level, a second component that connects us to the events of Tisha B'Av. I think that for many Israelis, I think for the first time in Israel's history, they realized that the reason why our enemies hate us and want to kill us is not just a regular political conflict about territories or about peace or war. I mean, the first ones to be murdered by these Nukba terrorists were the peace activists of Kibbutz Be'eri, of Kibbutz Kfar Gaza, those who were taking the patients from Gaza, escorting them to the hospitals and give them medical treatment. These were the first ones to be murdered by them. So all of a sudden, I think most of the Israeli society realized that the reason why our enemies hate us in Gaza, and not only in Gaza, is connected to something which is very fundamental in the relationship between Jews and its enemies throughout Jewish history, which is not about, it's not only about territories, it's more about something which is spiritual. We came with vision for the world. We came with values that we want to share them and to be a source of bless for the entire humanity, versus our enemy that created here with all the resources that they had, that they could develop a Hong Kong or Singapore in Gaza. But instead of that, they created and developed channels of hatred, channels of bombings. Instead of creating peace and prosperity for their own people, they brought destruction and hatred. And I think it's most of the Israelis feel today that it's a battle, it's a conflict between good and evil. And in this sense, it connects us again to the very, very first occasions that occurred to us in Tisha B'Av 2,000 years ago.
One of the things that we saw in the aftermath of October 7th was really an amazing display of achdut, of unity, of the Jewish people coming together from the diaspora, but definitely also here in Israel, people throwing aside all of the fights and those battles that we spoke about before, that were there before October 7th. And for a period of at least several months, things seemed like maybe we had learned a lesson. Maybe we were changing as a people. Maybe we were going to go in a different new direction and understand that when we weaken ourselves and when we are divided, our enemies take advantage of that, like Hamas did, like Hezbollah did as well. It seems to me, and I'm curious what you think, Rabbi Stav, that definitely in the last couple of months, and all the more so in the last few weeks, we're almost back to the way things were. There still is a war going on. There still is a battle in Gaza. We're still, as you and I are speaking and recording this conversation, we're still waiting with great anticipation and anxiety of trepidation of what will happen if and when Iran or Hezbollah will attack Israel, as we've all been waiting for that to maybe happen over the last 2 weeks. But we're back to this same what happened in State Taiman and what happened in Beit Lid and what's happening in the media and the discourse. How do you come to terms with that, and how do you suggest that we move beyond that?
And you forgot to mention in the event of the of Yom Kippur, the prayers in Tel Aviv that is now rising up again. And I guess you could mention a few other events as well.
Right.
Well, first of all, I think that you are right in the way you describe it, but it's only one part of the picture. That's the picture, by the way, that most Israelis see in the screens of the social media or in the internet or in the television. And you are 100% right. I believe that the vast majority of the Israeli society is not there. The 70% of the Israeli society believes in unity and believes in values of solidarity and responsibility and of readiness to compromise on all issues that are in dispute, whether it's the prayers in Tel Aviv. And by the way, I must comment that most of the left-wingers criticize the decision of the mayor of Tel Aviv, saying it's impossible that if we want to be liberal and inclusive, we will not be able to contain for one day that Orthodox Jews will be able to pray in the way they want to pray. But having said that, I think that what you described is the accurate description of the 20% from both sides, from the edges of society that gets the attention because of the fact that media is interested in blood, interested in edges, because that sells more and that creates more interest and more attention among the people. When I meet the people, wherever I see them, and trust me, I don't want to say thousands of people every week, but I think it's close to this number in different places, in different circles. I think that the vast majority of Israeli society learned the lesson. They want to change their approach to others. I believe that eventually the spirit of solidarity will win, but it requires from the media people to listen more or to raise more the voice of these 70%, that the voice is not heard enough, at least not enough.
Right. One of the things that's happening this year that's a little different than previous years when it comes to Tisha B'Av is certain forms of prayer, right? And what you mentioned earlier, keynote, are these prayers that go back, different Jewish verses that commemorate the tragedies of Jewish history, from the destruction of the temples to the Crusades to the Holocaust. And at Tzohar, the organization that you run and lead and founded, you have drafted a new kina called Kinat Be'eri, named for Kibbutz Be'eri. And I just want to read one of the opening lines. How did Be'eri turn into my tomb, the day of my light to the day of my gloom? I think it's very moving, obviously, and it was written and it's being played also by Israeli musician Yagel Harush, who was involved also in the writing of the lyrics. But for me, I'm curious on a couple of levels. First of all, the addition of new prayer, right, is something that you don't see that often in Orthodox Judaism, right? You don't, with the prayers that we recite or are commanded to recite 3 times a day are prayers that were created thousands of years ago. We don't often see rabbis in the 21st or 20th century writing new prayers for people to say. That's number one. Number two is what other parts and what other new acts, customs beyond just Kinat Be'eri do you think we'll see on this Tisha B'Av?
Well, first of all, I would like to add one more question to your question. Please, if you want, if you will forgive me. A rabbi called me this afternoon, not a rabbi, actually, a journalist called me this afternoon asking me, Rav Stav, I want to understand. Most of the Israelis do not say special prayers for the Holocaust. So with all the respect to the events of October 7th, you cannot compare it to the Holocaust. And yet, most Jews do not say special kinot for the Holocaust. And this year, the feeling in the air is that hundreds of thousands of Israelis will say kinot after the October 7th event. How come? And well, the real answer is that the Holocaust deserves more than one kinah, deserves hundreds of kinot. And I think that the main answer is divided to two. A, that after the Holocaust, Jews were shocked, and they didn't have the ability even to write special prayers for the Holocaust. And second of all, that the creative modern Orthodox Jewry was so weak that didn't have the ability and the courage to write kinot. I could tell you from my personal experience, I don't know if you could guess how many special prayers were already written this year after the events of October 7th. Not less than 20, 25 rabbis and women rabbis have written kinot for the events of Be'eri and all the events that occurred on October 7th. That means one thing. A, that we are very sensitive and our rabbis are very creative. And more than that, they understand that if we want to connect ourselves to the ancient Tisha B'Av, we must create the connection to the contemporary situation. We have to explain ourselves that what we are experiencing now, from the aspect of the hatred and from the aspect of the external threat that is fighting against our mission as Jews, these two elements are deeply connected to Tisha B'Av. And if we want Tisha B'Av to be something that is meaningful for us, we have to make to connect the reality of our situation today to the Tisha B'Av that took place 2,000 years ago.
And beyond just the writing of a new kina or kinat be'eri, which Tzohar was involved in, what other activities should we expect? I mean, there's lots of learning I know that goes on, lots of rabbis that are giving lectures, women scholars as well. What else should we be expecting this Tisha B'Av?
I think that this Tisha B'Av, thousands of sessions will be about how to prevent the next destruction. I could tell you that in a few minutes, while we are talking now, in a few minutes, we have here a conference in the Museum of Tolerance, joined with the Tzohar, a big evening, a big event of Rav Micha Goodman and Rabbi Yaakov Medan and Ben Dror Yemini and Orit Navon and myself, discussing how do we observe the third temple. We believe that we live in a time of redemption, but what we have learned this year that nothing could be taken for granted and nothing is guaranteed. So I believe that this Tisha B'Av will be very different. In many places, people will discuss what should be done in order to prevent the next destruction. But I think that, to be honest with you, I think our eyes are now already to how we will be commemorating or celebrating the next Yom Kippur and the next Simchat Torah. Simchat Torah that will be actually the year after the October 7th, although it's only the Jewish calendar, not the civil date of October 7th. I think this year will be very special. And I think that the dances will look different. I guess we will dance with the Torah, but much quieter. I believe that there will be special dancing dedicated for those who were massacred on October 7th. I believe that since this year, from this year on, Tisha B'Av will look different, Yom Kippur will look different, and Simchat Torah will look different. We live in a historical time of the Jewish people that these events of October 7th could be compared only to special events from the history of the Bible, or compared to the Holocaust or to the Crusade. Something that we don't yet have the time to evaluate what will be the influence and the impact of these events on us. We hope that we will turn the terrible events that occurred to us this year to a joy and happiness. But it will take
Rabbi Stav, before I let you go, just one last question. We have a lot of listeners and viewers definitely joining us from the United States and other places around the diaspora and around the world, and even non-Jews. And I'm curious what you would say to them on this Tisha B'Av. What should they be thinking? How should they be viewing this day, commemorating it maybe slightly differently than in the past? And like you said before, for most Israeli Jews, it didn't really mean much, and now it is going to be much. But let's talk about the Diaspora Jews to wrap up.
Well, first of all, I want to make a kind of advertisement. We actually published a special version in English. And I could tell you that until last week, already more than 50 communities were connected to our link and downloaded our booklet. It's a much bigger than the Hebrew version, because we don't only publish there the prayer of Kinat Be'eri, but we added what we call the relevant commentary or interpretation of the ancient prayers of Tisha B'Av with connection to the contemporary events. So we referred to 10 or 15 special kinot with different rabbis that created the connection between the ancient kinot to our situation. And I believe that it will enrich everybody that will download it, and I'm sure you will.
We'll add a link to the notes on this podcast, so people will also be able to download it.
Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing, I think that I don't have to explain to the American jury and to the world jury. This year, what happened in Be'eri, what happened in Israel, was not only influential on Israel. It was influential on the world jury just as much. The anti-Semitism that has grown up and that we have seen in all the campuses, and that so many Jews confronted them directly, have given us a lesson that the hatred to Jews and the anti-Semitism is a challenge for all of us. This year, we understand that we have to deepen our understanding about what is it about to be Jewish? What does it mean? What is the mission? Why are we hated? I mean, what belongs to them belongs to them. But what do we have to learn from that? What is special? What is our news? What is our mission? What are our values that we want to strengthen ourselves with them, and that we want to share them with others, to be a source of blessing? How should we become a source of moral values, of blessing to the entire world? I think this year carries that mission more than any other year in the past.
Rabbi David Stav, thank you so much for